Hello and welcome to More to the Story with Molly White. I am glad you joined me again today. And before I get started and introduce my co-host and our special guest, I do want to give a shout out to Dr. Stephen Hotze with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center for being our show's sponsor. Without his sponsorship, we wouldn't be able to do this. And we want to invite you to sow seed into this podcast because we're reaching people with the truth that abortion hurts women. We're reaching hurting women and men who've had an abortion in their past and encouraging them to go through healing. We are reaching young, vulnerable pregnant women who might be seduced into having an abortion to choose life for their children. And we're educating people on the topic of abortion. And this is just a very well needed show that is going on, reaching across the United States and into the world. And so if you would like to sow seed into that, you can go to moretothestorypodcast.org, or you can go to operationoutcry.org and you'll see the website links below you on the screen. And there is a place that you can donate or learn how to be a show sponsor. So enough of that. Let me introduce to you my awesome, wonderful co-host, which you know very well, Mary Browning. So Mary, come on in.
Thank you, Molly. It's so good to be here on the show again with you today.
Well,
We have an interesting guest today, but before we go there, we will be hearing a story, a personal experience of abortion. So if you're listening and you have children with you, we want to be sure you take some precautions because some of the information won't be appropriate for young people to hear. The other kind of warning we want to mention is if you have any experience with abortion, you may find yourselves having an emotional reaction to that. And if it occurs, we think of that as a trigger, and it's just an invitation to step into healing. So we'll have opportunities for that along the way. But one of those is to call the H3 helpline at 866-721-7881. And we do want to mention that we are women of Operation Outcry. And Operation Outcry is just a tribe of women who have abortion in their past. And we have found one another. And we find ways of speaking out about the harm of our experience. So we also invite you to operationoutcry.org. Thank you, Molly.
Well, thank you, Mary. And I'm glad you remembered that. We do invite you to join operationoutcry.org. And there's a declaration on there you can fill out about your abortion experience. And it just helps with our educational tools. And if you're ready to speak out, and if you're not ready to speak out, we encourage you to do so. All you got to do is just take that first step, and you're going to realize no one's going to stone you for it. So, but we're here to come along beside you and help you with that process. And Mary, you were saying something earlier that kind of caused me to think about. Now I forgot, so I'm going to think about it later.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I had one of those senior moments that went right out of my mind, but we do want to introduce our special guest. And we were talking, I think, about being triggered, when you hear an abortion testimony, which means that you've got some unhealed places in your life concerning your own abortion. And, we do want you, oh, I know what I was going to say. You gave out the helpline number. And if you call that helpline number, tell them you heard about them on More to the Story. I think they would appreciate that. So that's what I was going to say. So would you like to introduce our guest or would you like for me to?
I would love to introduce her.
Good.
Susan is a new friend of mine and of ours. She is living in Oregon. She has an abortion story and testimony that she's going to tell us about. She has a law degree, but she's done some other interesting things, and she's glad not to be practicing. But her experience with Rachel's Vineyard and working with people in abortion recovery is part of what we'll hear about today too. So we welcome Susan Swander.
There she is.
There she is.
We were looking for you, Susan.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for taking the time to share with us, some intimate things in your life. And you're in good company because Mary and I both have been down that unfortunate path before. But God saves, delivers, and heals, doesn't He, Susan?
Yes, he does. Well, I'm
So
honored to be here. Grateful that I was invited to join this. As we talked about a little bit before we started, I actually uh, gave my testimony back in 2008 in San Antonio, Texas. Um, but my
on the Faces of Abortion television show.
yes,
Hmm.
yes,
Hmm. I co-hosted that before Cindy Collins, who I think was the host at the time that you were on.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, awesome. And let me ask you, Susan, you live in Oregon. Have you
yes.
always lived there?
No, I've been here for about 35 years. I
Okay.
grew up in Southern California, um, in Santa Barbara to be exact. Moved there when I was 6 with my family. My
Okay.
dad taught at the University of California, Santa Barbara, so that's how we wound up there.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about, you know, uh, what led you into doing abortion recovery. You know.
Well, what got me here after 36 years of silence and denial was the fact that I had 3 abortions. My first abortion was in 1968, before Roe v. Wade. It was not legal in California, so I joined an abortion railroad and went to Mexico.
Wow.
Um, I recently ran across a story about that underground railroad to Mexico that I found very interesting.
Wow.
I didn't
We.
realize that I was actually part of that, but some people I knew in Santa Barbara made the connections for me. And when I first told them that I was pregnant, they all laughed. It was a family, and they laughed and they said, "Oh, give her a drink. We'll take care of everything." And they did. Um, I wasn't forced. I wasn't, but I was lied to. I wasn't told what was really going on. The man involved in the pregnancy was a one night stand. I had become very promiscuous in my college years. Um, it was easy to do in the 60s. I was a 60s kid, drinking and drugging and all the rest of it. And sex was part of that, sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it was a one night stand, and I didn't even know the man. He was long gone. So I had that abortion in Mexico. Had no idea how it impacted me,
Can I
except that
ask you a question, Susan? Was it a medical abortion or a surgical?
surgical.
Okay.
Yeah, back in the old days, it was just a surgical. And what happened when I got there was I hadn't eaten. I drank on the plane all the way down there.
You're talking about drinking alcohol.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
okay.
The woman that traveled with me, one of the family members, made sure I was good and drunk. Uh,
Mm,
and when I got to this clinic in Mexico, they wouldn't do the surgery that night because I was too drunk.
wow.
So they kept me overnight, sobered me up, fed me, and did the abortion the next day. And then we flew home, and it was like it was over and done with. And because I was drunk most of the couple days, I don't have many memories of it. I know that there was a thunder and lightning storm that night. I had a very weird hamburger that tasted very good, but it's bits and pieces. Um, and when I got back to Santa Barbara, my life was fine. Everything was okay because I was no longer pregnant. And I continued to drink and continued my promiscuous lifestyle and just ran crazy. And my parents, I had been raised in a Catholic family, and my parents were good Catholics, and I didn't want them to know about my promiscuity. I didn't want them to know about the pregnancy, the abortion, or any of it. So I was very silent about it. And I drank pretty nicely for the next 10 years or whatever it was, 11 years. And I couldn't make a relationship work. I dated a lot of guys, but nothing stuck. And nothing in my life made sense. But I never connected it to the abortion. Um, and then I met the man of my dreams. He was perfect, except for one little fact. He was married to somebody else
Mm.
and was not about to get a divorce, but sure had fun with me. We had fun. And I wound up getting pregnant twice with this fellow. And he had a family of his own, wife and kids, and it was pretty much put to me that it was either him or the child. You know, I either get an abortion or he was gone from the picture. He paid for the abortions. One of them was in Santa Barbara in the 70s. And I remember he and I went to a motel and we drank. And he took me to the abortion clinic. And I really don't have any memory of that particular clinic. I remember drinking. Um, and afterwards, he picked me up and we went back to this motel. And all I can remember is that I was drinking what are the orange juice and vodka, screwdrivers, I
Mm.
guess they're called. And I hated orange juice, but that's what we were drinking that day.
Mm.
And the rest of the day is kind of a blank. My alcoholism was developing nicely.
Mm.
Um,
Could you see that did it increase after your first abortion?
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
increased. Yeah.
The abortion did not cause my alcoholism. I was alcoholic long before I ever had the abortion, but the abortion gave me another reason to keep drinking. And uh, and yes, the drinking got worse and the promiscuity and everything got worse. Even while I was involved with this married fellow, I was dating other men too. So everything increased, the alcohol, the promiscuity, everything. Um, and after this, I had moved to Oregon by the time I had the third abortion. And before I came to Oregon, there was also a miscarriage in there after the second abortion. And
Mm.
I'm convinced to this day that miscarriage was because of the abortions,
Mm-hmm.
that something was not right in my womb and it just was not going to, it was not going
Sustain
to
a
have a
baby.
child
Mhm.
there.
Right. Your
So,
womb was damaged. Yes.
yeah, so there was child number 3. Um, I do have one living child, a son who was born in 81. And we moved to Oregon in 85. And my journey there, I wound up getting sober
Mm.
in 1985, actually. No, we moved to Oregon in 1989. I'd gotten sober in 85 in Santa Barbara. And I am so grateful for that sobriety.
Mhm.
I'm coming up on 40 years this February.
Congratulations.
Very good.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah, 39 and a half. So
Pardon?
you're over 39 years now. That's good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when we came to Oregon, I was sober. I was living a fairly decent life. I was still seeing my married friend, and we wound up pregnant again.
Mm.
And again, I was given the choice, him or the child. And even though I was sober, I was so convinced that it was the only way out of this particular situation. And again, I had been lied to all the way along
And
that I was,
that's coercion.
yeah,
It's
yes,
coercion.
they were forced.
Mm-hmm.
And, based on fraud and lies from the providers. I was told it wasn't a child, it was a clump of cells, all of the standard lies were given to me each time. Nobody ever told me the truth. And I think probably somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth, but since nobody was confirming that, I didn't want to believe it. So I
Right.
did. Um, so I had the third abortion. Again, he paid for it. A friend took me to the clinic, and
And
that
he
I
wouldn't
remember
even
a
go
bit
with you.
better. Pardon?
He wouldn't even go with you.
Well, he was still in California. He
Mm.
didn't move to Oregon with me, so um, and he didn't come up for it. No. Um,
So let me ask you, Susan, was this third abortion after you had a child, or you had a child after your third abortion?
I had my son first, and then the third abortion happened after.
Okay. So yeah, and I just kind of wanted to um, add that from what I've learned in my own experience is that after your first abortion you kind of shut down and you're numb, but you get into this cycle of repeated destructive behaviors in your a lot of women, I think more than what 60% have multiple abortions, and it's in this psychological confusion, this trauma, whatever we're experiencing, can lead to multiple abortions, and we just shut down more and more and more, the more often that we have them, just in order to cope, in order to survive, until somehow that chain is broken. And that's the important thing, is you got to break that chain that leads you back into those doors again.
And for many of those years, I was adamantly pro abortion, pro choice, whatever label you want to put on it. I can remember arguing with my dear sweet mother, who was very anti abortion, and she didn't know at the time about mine. And so we'd argue, and I would, Mom, you're wrong. It didn't hurt me in the least. And, I'm blah, 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 I'm better off. And I never would have gone to law school if I had had a kid, and all, the standard baloney from me.
Well,
Uh,
and that's very common too. And it's
yeah,
called
Yeah.
justification.
yes,
And it's also, what I've learned in my own life and other people I've been around, is that the angrier a woman is and the more pro-choice she is, the higher the chances are that she's had an abortion that she has to defend. Because if you
there are
can't
lots of
defend,
people that I would like to ask that question to.
oh,
How many
I
Yeah.
abortions
I
have you
I
had?
can guarantee you. I can guarantee
Yeah,
you, because I was that way and you were that way.
yeah,
We had to defend abortion because we had to defend what we did. And
yeah,
because if we couldn't defend it, then we'd have to face the truth, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
And I've confronted women about that before, and they did confess,
yeah,
but it didn't hurt me. I said, I see
yeah,
hurt all over
Right.
you.
yeah.
Right.
you know.
And the
Well,
repeat abortion is partially to repeat the trauma and to try to have a different outcome that
Right,
doesn't hurt.
right. And
And that's a psychological trick that our brains do and help us to justify what we've done. And we think, well, this time it won't be that bad.
right.
This time it'll be different. I won't feel as guilty or shameful.
Yeah, or this will be my last time. I promise I will never do it
Yeah.
again. But yes, it
And,
is a psychological. Um,
and I didn't even know, that I was feeling guilt and shame or any of that for many, many years.
so when did that provoke, or when did you know there's something's going on here, and something's going to shift, or it has to shift?
Well, it was in early winter in 2003. We had a snowstorm in Oregon here on the coast, which doesn't happen very often, but it meant that I didn't go to the church that I usually go to, which is about 15 miles away, because the roads were icy. So I went to the local church that's only a couple blocks away from my house. And I picked up the bulletin after the mass, and I'm, Catholic again, and came back into the church well, it was after my son was born, and that was a whole nother story of how I wound up coming back into the church, but I did. And I came home with the bulletin, and there was a little tiny box ad in the bulletin that simply said, if you are hurting after an abortion, there is hope and healing. And it gave the website for rachelsvineyard.org
Mm.
and an 800 phone number. And I thought, what's this all about? And being the good computer junkie that I am, I jumped on my laptop and looked at rachelsvineyard.org and sat there weeping buckets of tears for about 2 hours.
Wow.
I could not catch my breath. I couldn't stop crying. It was the first time I had ever acknowledged that I had lost 3 children to abortion
Wow.
and possibly a fourth for the miscarriage.
Mm.
Um,
That
it
was
was
God. God was setting you up, wasn't he?
big time. It took me a
Mhm.
while to call the 800 number, but I finally did. Actually, the number wasn't the 800 number to Rachel's Vineyard main office. It was a local number in Oregon. It took me a while, but I finally called, and this very lovely woman on the other end of the phone, Lori, said, "How can I help you?" And she told me what I needed to hear. I don't remember the exact conversation to this day, but she said the
Like you
next,
remember her name. That's
yeah, I
amazing.
do remember her name. She made an impact on me. Um, the next retreat was in February of the following year. And again, the weather was horrible, and I don't drive well on icy roads. And it was a 3-hour drive for me. And so I didn't go to that one. I think I was still kind of hedging my bets. Um,
Mhm.
Avoidance.
Did you really need to go? Yeah.
Yeah, it's avoiding because you know it's not gonna
yeah,
something
maybe this
something's
isn't
gonna come up that
really,
you're not that you're not aware of or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I finally went on my first Rachel's Vineyard retreat in April of 2004.
Mm.
And the whole way driving to that retreat, it was only about an hour drive and wasn't rainy or snowy. And the whole time I was driving there, I kept saying to myself, why am I going? What am I doing? I don't have to go. I can turn around and go home. I'm close. I don't have to go. Just constantly. God kept me on the road and got me to that retreat. And I walked into that retreat scared to death, afraid of what was going to happen, who I was going to meet, what was this whole thing all about, and wound up meeting 10 or 12 of the most wonderful human beings I've ever met in my life.
Mhm.
Um, there were other post abortive women there looking for healing. The team was comprised of primarily post abortive people who had been through their own healing and had joined Rachel's Vineyard Ministry. There was a priest in attendance. It was unbelievable, the experience I had to finally look at it, own it, and ask for forgiveness from God and from my 3 children, my 4 children. I always include my miscarriage because
Yes,
he's
absolutely.
he's part of the or she's part of the crew.
Absolutely.
Um, and I named them,
Yeah.
and for the first time, they were very real to me.
Mm.
Um, Luke, Grace, Teresa, and Benjamin are very real.
Awesome.
And we were at the
Names.
end of the, pardon?
They're beautiful names,
Mhm.
Susan.
Yeah.
And I might mention, I know Molly usually does this, but we are running close to the time that we're hoping to wrap up. So
Oh,
maybe you could just tell us, I think we're going to have to touch on some other things at another time with you.
sure.
But what would you want our listeners to know if there's somebody out there like you and like I had been for years and Molly that has not been through healing and recovery? What would you want them to know about Rachel's Vineyard?
Please reach out. There's a website, rachelsvineyard.org. It has 800 number, it has email addresses, it has a map of where the retreats are offered. They're worldwide. They're all over the country, all over Europe and Russia and China even. Um, and they work. They are healing. They didn't, I'm a 60s junkie. I wanted a quick fix. Didn't happen. I didn't get a quick fix, but I was given tools to continue my healing. I was able to find forgiveness, and that part of it was a quick fix, if you will.
Mhm,
Um, and my children forgave me.
mhm,
At the end of the retreat, one of the things we do is kind of write up a story or write up something we want to say to our children. And in that writing that I did, I made a promise to my children that I would not be quiet about them anymore. I would not be
mhm.
silent, that I would
Amen.
share our story wherever and whenever I could, which is part of the reason I do things like this. There
Amen.
is help out there. If you're hurting after an abortion, you're not alone. There are a lot of us around, and there is healing available. It doesn't
Amen.
matter whether you believe in God or not. It's not, I mean, that helps, I think, but we've had people on our retreats that are not believing people. We've had some atheists, some agnostics, and they've all been able to find healing tools to continue the healing process.
Amen.
And
It
just
takes
and just
work.
so Susan, just so our listeners understand, so you came through Rachel's Vineyard, got your own healing, and now are you a volunteer in Rachel's Vineyard in the recovery program there in Oregon?
Yes, I have been since 2005. I'm on the board of directors of the nonprofit here that sponsors the retreats here. We have
Amen.
3 a year here in Oregon. Um,
Yeah. I just wanted to add real quick too that, you know, Mary was saying if you're hurting from your abortion, even if you don't think you're hurting from your abortion experience, I would encourage you to go to a Rachel's Vineyard retreat. Like Susan said, there's a website here, rachelsvineyard.org. Their retreats are available everywhere. They're free of charge. They're safe. They're loving. They're nurturing. They're caring. And just see if God has something for you during that retreat. Even if
Molly,
you don't.
let me just correct one thing you said. They're not free of charge. We do charge for
Okay.
them, but if somebody can't afford the retreat, there are scholarships available. We
Okay.
never turn anyone away because they don't have the finances. We make
Okay.
sure that everybody is able to come regardless of the financial situation.
And just real quick, tell us what that charge is, and then how long of a program. And do you provide the lodging and the meals? Is that included?
A Rachel's Vineyard retreat is usually 3 days from Friday to Sunday, and it includes lodging, meals, all the material. There are usually 10 to 12 people in attendance, and then there's a team of 7 or 8 people doing holding the retreat. And the cost is, gosh, I just went blank. I think the cost here in Oregon, I think we just raised it to 300 for the weekend. It's
Okay.
either 250 or 300. But as I say, we can always help with the finances. We
And
don't
that's a
we want
small price to pay for being
It's a lot
liberated and
cheaper than
set
therapy.
free. Pardon?
And faster.
Pardon?
Oh, it's much cheaper than therapy.
Yes, yes, and so worth it. So worth it.
And there is on every retreat there is a therapist in attendance in case somebody needs that added piece of support or healing
Mhm.
that a
Or
therapist can
counsel.
provide.
Mhm. Amen.
Listen, I have just one question and then I know we need to wrap up. And that is, our listeners may be curious, whatever happened to that long-term relationship that you had with that married man?
It finally went by the wayside, thank God.
Mhm.
Okay. And was that after you had been to Rachel's Vineyard?
Actually, it was the weekend before I went.
Wow.
Um,
Awesome.
I met him in Chicago, of all places, for a quick weekend. and told him what I was doing, and he was flabbergasted and wanted nothing more to do with me.
Mm.
So I wanted nothing more to do with
Well,
him either.
he had a wall there. He was trying to protect his
Yeah,
own trauma. I mean, because men
yeah.
do hurt as well. Well, I
Yeah.
wanted to close by this because we're encouraged